Number 3. Francisco Paulo Gonzalez. In the spring of 1964, Francisco Paulo Gonzalez was 27 years old and he was living in San Francisco, California. Gonzalez was a native of the Philippines. 4 years earlier, in 1960, he had competed in the Olympics as a member of the Philippines sailing team. But in that spring of 1964, life wasn't going well for Gonzalez. He was having marital problems and he was deeply in debt. Half of his paycheck was being paid out to the people he was indebted to. Gonzalez had also become quite disturbed. He often threatened his family members. He told them he was going to kill them and then kill himself. He then started telling his friends and family that he would either die on May 6th or May 7th. On May 6th, Gonzalez purchased a .357 Magnum from a friend of a friend. He then flew to Reno, Nevada. He spent the night gambling in casinos. He told an employee at one of the casinos that he didn't care how much money he lost because it wouldn't matter tomorrow. Early the next morning, Gonzalez went back to the airport. At the airport, he took 2 life insurance policies out on himself. In total, they would pay out $105,000. The beneficiary of the insurance policies was his wife. Gonzalez then boarded Pacific Airlines Flight 773, which was a twin-engine Fairchild F-274A airliner. It was heading to San Francisco with a stop in Stockton. At 5:54 a.m., the plane took off with 33 passengers and 3 crew members. The plane landed in Stockton, where 2 people deboarded and 10 people got on. At 6:28 a.m., the plane took off from Stockton with 41 passengers and 3 crew members. 10 minutes later, the Oakland Air Route Traffic Control Center received a garbled message from the plane. He said, "Skipper shot, we've been shot, trying to help." And then the radio went dead. Shortly after the transmission was received, another plane was sent to the area where the plane sent the transmission. They reported back that the plane had crashed into a hillside. Emergency responders were dispatched to the area, but it was hopeless. All 44 people who were on board were dead. About 6 months later, the Civil Aeronautics Board released their report on what happened. They concluded that 27-year-old Francisco Paulo Gonzalez brought a gun on board. He got into the cockpit and shot both the pilot and the co-pilot. He then turned the gun on himself. After the pilots were shot, the plane went into a sharp descent and it crashed into the hillside. It was the first time in the United States that a pilot and co-pilot were killed by a passenger in a murder-suicide. It led to new laws for airline security, like restricting firearms on board. With 43 victims, it was the biggest mass murder committed by an individual until October 1st, 2017. That's when 64-year-old Stephen Paddock opened fire at concertgoers who were attending a country music festival on the Las Vegas Strip. Paddock indiscriminately killed 58 people. Another 422 people were injured by gunfire, and a further 429 more were injured in the chaos that was caused by the shooting. When Paddock was done shooting at innocent people, he took his own life. Number 2. The Palm Sunday Massacre. April 15th, 1984 was Palm Sunday, which is the Sunday before Easter. 34-year-old Enrique Bermudez lived in the East New York neighborhood of Brooklyn. He lived with his 24-year-old girlfriend, Virginia Lopez. At the time, she was 6 months pregnant. Enrique's daughters, 14-year-old Betsy and 10-year-old Marilyn, lived with them as well, as did Virginia's sons, 4-year-old Juan and 7-year-old Eddie. On that Palm Sunday afternoon, Enrique was out of the house. He returned home late that afternoon, and he was horrified by what he found. He called the police, and they arrived a few minutes later. Even hardened homicide detectives were shocked by the crime scene. Virginia, Betsy, Marilyn, Eddie, and Juan had all been shot to death. Unfortunately, when they were attacked, they had company. Virginia's cousin, 20-year-old Carmen Perez, and her 3 children, 5-year-old Alberto, 3-year-old Noel, and 13-month-old Christina, were visiting. Also visiting was Carmen's sister, 14-year-old Magdalia Perez, and their cousin, 10-year-old Maria Perez. Out of the 11 people in the house, 10 of them were shot to death. Only 13-month-old Christina was unharmed. The crime scene was described as eerily quiet. It appeared that all 10 people were shot as they were sitting and watching TV. None of them even had a chance to run and hide. In total, 19 bullets have been fired from 2 pistols, a .22 caliber and a .38 caliber. The police thought that since 2 guns were used and the victims didn't have time to react, that there was most likely 2 gunmen. They also thought that the motive was most likely related to drugs. One reason they thought this was because Enrique Bermudez was a cocaine dealer. The police also thought that because of the barbarity of the crime, that was possibly the work of a Colombian cartel. But then, over the next several weeks, the police started to receive tips that a drug addict named Christopher Thomas might have done the shooting. Thomas had a history of violence. On Halloween night 1981, Thomas's 24-year-old girlfriend, Carol Epps, was found strangled to death in a motel room. Thomas was charged with her murder and he went to trial, but he was ultimately acquitted. Just days before the massacre, Thomas broke into his estranged wife's home and he beat her senseless. On May 22nd, weeks after the Palm Sunday massacre, the police searched Thomas's estranged wife's home. It turned out that before Thomas had been kicked out, he had a habit of shooting mice with his .22 caliber pistol. One of the children who lived in the home had saved the shell casings after Thomas shot the mice, and the police collected the shell casings from him. The casings were then compared to the casings that were found at the crime scene. They were a match. When the police learned that they were a match, Thomas wasn't hard to find. He was in jail. Exactly why he was in jail is unclear. Some reports said that it was because he had raped and sodomized his own mother. Other reports said that he had only attempted to rape and sodomize his mother. On June 19th, while Thomas was still in jail for sexually assaulting his mother, or attempting to sexually assault her, he was charged with 10 counts of murder. He pleaded not guilty. He went to trial 13 months after he was charged. The prosecution said that Enrique Bermudez had been Thomas's drug dealer, and they had several arguments over some deals. Thomas also incorrectly thought that Enrique was having an affair with his estranged wife. but when he discovered that Enrique wasn't there, he killed the 2 women, one who was 6 months pregnant, and the 8 children. Thomas's lawyer said that at the time of the massacre, Thomas was doing a lot of cocaine. He also said that Thomas was deeply disturbed over the state of his marriage. The jury deliberated for 16 hours over 3 days. They ended up acquitting Thomas on all counts of murder. Instead, he was found guilty on 10 counts of manslaughter. The jury thought that because of his drug use and his mental state, he wasn't entirely responsible for his actions. He was sentenced to the maximum, which was 8 1/3 years, to 25 years in prison. He was ordered to serve each sentence consecutively, which meant his sentence was 83 years to 250 years of prison. But according to state law, he could only serve a maximum of 50 years. And he wouldn't even have to serve the entire 50 years because of another law that would allow him to apply for parole after serving 2/3 of his sentence. So in May 2009, Thomas applied for parole. His request was denied. Over the next 8 years, he applied for parole 4 more times, and he was denied each time. Then in January 2018, after serving 33 years of prison for the cold-blooded murders of 2 women, one who was 6 months pregnant, and 8 children, Christopher Thomas, who was 68, was released on parole. He will remain on parole until 2034. One of the first police officers to arrive on the scene was Joanne Jaffe. When Jaffe arrived at the scene, the sole survivor of the massacre, 13-month-old Christina Perez, was handed over to her. Christina's mother and her 2 brothers were killed in the slaughter. Jaffe took Christina to the hospital and watched over her that night. Jaffe kept in contact with Christina as she grew up. When Christina was 14, she moved in with Jaffe and her husband. When Christina was in her late 20s, her grandmother, who was her guardian, passed away. So Jaffe decided to adopt her. In 2013, when Christina was 31 years old, the adoption process was completed. That means Jaffe is legally Christina's mother. Number 1. The Walk of Death. Howard Unruh was born in Camden, New Jersey in January 1921. He grew up there and he was raised by his mother. His father had left the family during his childhood. In 1942, when Unruh was 21 years old, he enlisted in the Army. It turned out that Unruh was talented when it came to firing a gun. He reached the level of marksman. This talent served him well when he saw action in Europe. Unruh was part of a tank unit in Europe. He supposedly loved firing his unit's 105mm howitzer. As his unit advanced through Italy, France, Belgium, and finally Germany, he kept a diary. In his diary, he kept detailed notes about all the men he killed. In great detail, he would describe the corpses. At the end of the war, Unruh was honorably discharged and he returned to Camden. He enrolled in Temple University's School of Pharmacology, but he dropped out after 3 months. In the early summer of 1949, Unruh was living with his mother in Camden. He was unemployed and he had become somewhat of a recluse. Unruh's bedroom was a shrine to war and he had an extensive collection of weapons. Unruh had also become deeply paranoid. He was sure that his neighbors were mocking him and laughing at him behind his back. On September 5, 1949, Unruh installed a new fence gate at his mother's home. He then went to a movie theater. He returned home at 3 a.m. When he got home, he noticed that the fence gate had been stolen. This made him incredibly angry, and he decided, in the morning, he was going to do something about it. Unruh got out of bed at 8 that morning, and he ate some breakfast. His mother noticed that he had a crazed look in his eyes, so she left their apartment and went to a neighbor's home. At 9:20 a.m., Unruh left his home, armed with a German Luger 9mm pistol and 33 rounds of ammunition. He was dressed in a dark suit, a white shirt, and a bow tie. He walked into a nearby shoe repair shop. Working there was 27-year-old John Pilarczyk. A young boy was also in the shop. Pilarczyk was working on the young boy's shoes. Unruh shot Pilarczyk twice. The second shot entered Pilarczyk's head, and he died within minutes. Unruh ignored the young boy who was in the shop. Unruh then walked into a barber shop. The barber, 33-year-old Clark Hoover, had a carousel horse in the shop, and children would sit on it while they got their hair cut. When Unruh walked into the shop, Hoover was cutting 6-year-old Orris Smith's hair while he sat on the horse. Orris's mother was standing beside them. Unruh shot both Orris and Hoover to death in front of her. He then walked nonchalantly out of the barber shop. Unruh's next stop was a tavern owned by a man named Frank Engel. Engel heard the gunshots, and he got the patrons out of the tavern. Engel heard the gunshots, and he got the patrons out of the tavern. When Unruh realized that no one was in the tavern, he walked back out onto the street and fired into a random apartment window. His bullet entered the head of 2-year-old Thomas Hamilton, killing him. Next, Unruh fired his gun at a passing car. The driver, 24-year-old TV repairman Alvin Day, was struck and killed. Frank Engel had a gun, and he fired a shot at Unruh from the second floor of his building. If Unruh was hit, he didn't show that he was injured. Unruh then made his way to a pharmacy that was owned by the Cohen family. The Cohens lived in the basement of the building where Unruh and his mother lived. Unruh had gotten into several heated arguments with the Cohens. When Unruh reached the pharmacy, 45-year-old insurance salesman Jason Hutton was walking out. Unruh shot him in the head, killing him. In the pharmacy that morning was 40-year-old Maurice Cohen, his 38-year-old wife, Rose, his 63-year-old mother, Minnie, and his 12-year-old son, Charles. Maurice got his wife and his son to hide in closets. He then ran to the roof of the building. Unruh had yet to enter the pharmacy, and he shot Maurice, and this caused Maurice to fall from the roof to the ground. Unruh then entered the pharmacy and shot Rose through the closet door. He then shot Minnie as she called the police. 12-year-old Charles Cohen escaped the massacre physically unscathed. The other 3 members of his family who were shot all died because of their wounds. Unruh then walked back out to the street and found a car sitting at a red light. Inside the car was 37-year-old Helen Matlack, her 9-year-old son, John, and her 68-year-old mother, Emma Matlack. Unruh shot all three to death. An 18-year-old man approached one of the dead bodies lying on the ground, and Unruh shot him. He ultimately survived his injury. Next, Unruh broke into the home of 36-year-old Madeline Harry. Also in the home that morning was her 16-year-old son, Armand. Unruh shot them both. They both would go on to survive their wounds. Unruh then ran to his home and barricaded himself inside the apartment. About 50 police officers surrounded his building and opened fire. When the gunfire died down, an assistant editor of the local newspaper called Unruh's apartment, and Unruh answered the phone. Unruh was asked why he killed so many people, and Unruh said he didn't know. Tear gas was launched into the apartment, and this forced Unruh out. He was arrested without any further violence. In 12 minutes, Unruh had killed 6 men, 4 women, and 3 children. He injured 3 other people. His mass murder was called the Walk of Death. The crime was shocking, and it made headlines around the world. It was one of the first mass random shootings in American history. After Unruh was arrested, he was brought to the police station and questioned for several hours. It was only when the interview was over that the police realized that Unruh had been shot in his right side. He did not complain or even mention it once. He was taken to the same hospital where many of his victims had died or were dying. Unruh survived his gunshot wound. The bullet could not be removed from his body, so it's not sure if a police officer shot him or Frank Engel did. Unruh was eventually diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity, and he was committed to a psychiatric hospital. He died in a psychiatric hospital in October 2009 at the age of 88. Supposedly, before he died, he said, "I'd have killed 1,000 if I had enough bullets." One of the survivors of the Walk of Death was 12-year-old Charles Cohen. He hid in a closet in the pharmacy while Unruh shot the rest of his family to death. Charles went on to have a family of his own when he grew up. Charles Cohen, like the man who killed his family, died in 2009. On February 14, 2018, Charles' granddaughter, Carly Novell, was in attendance at her high school, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, in Parkland, Florida. That afternoon, expelled 19-year-old student Nicholas Cruz entered the school with a semi-automatic rifle. He murdered 17 students and staff and injured 17 more. Charles' granddaughter, Carly, did exactly what her grandfather did nearly 70 years earlier. She hid in a closet. Just like her grandfather, Carly escaped the massacre physically unscathed.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Number 3. Amanda Taylor. Rex Taylor met the woman who would become his wife, Amanda, while they were in high school. Shortly after they started dating, Amanda became pregnant and she dropped out of school. Rex and Amanda later got married and they had another child. Rex and Amanda had several things in common. For example, they had the same birthday. Also, they were both obsessed with serial killers. They both wrote letters to serial killers who were in prison. However, their marriage was less than idyllic. One of their biggest problems was that Rex was addicted to prescription drugs. In April 2014, Amanda and Rex separated. 4 months later, in August, Rex died by suicide. He had hanged himself. Amanda blamed Rex's father, Charlie Taylor, for getting Rex hooked on drugs. Amanda said that Charlie started giving Rex drugs when he was just 15 years old. Amanda decided she wanted to rid the world of Charlie Taylor. She planned to kill him on April 4th, 2015, which was her 24th birthday. It would have also been Rex's birthday. In the spring of 2015, Amanda enlisted the help of her friend, 32-year-old Sean Ball. On April 4th, Amanda and Ball bought a bayonet-style knife, and then Ball took some firearms from his family's home. Then they went over to Charlie's home, which was in Montgomery County, Virginia, and Charlie let them inside. They started talking, and at some point, the conversation turned to Rex. Then Amanda pulled out the knife and started stabbing Charlie as he sat on the couch. Ball had hidden a tire iron in his pants, and once Amanda started stabbing Charlie, he pulled out the tire iron. Ball then hit Charlie over the head 5 or 6 times with the tire iron. Amanda ended up stabbing her 59-year-old father-in-law 31 times. She then took several selfies of herself smiling, with Charlie's body in the background. She posted one of the photos on Instagram. In the posting, she wrote, "Everything I did was for the right reasons. I stabbed my father-in-law to death because he destroyed my husband. I wasn't the perfect wife, but this was one last thing I could do." Then on Facebook, she posted another picture and wrote in the captions, "I proudly did this for Rex." After the murder, Amanda and Ball fled to North Carolina. The day after the murder, Ball was found on the side of the road in North Carolina. He had suffered a gunshot wound to his face. He was taken to the hospital and he survived. Amanda was arrested not long after Ball was found on the side of the road. The police in North Carolina had been alerted to keep an eye out for her car. After she was arrested, she admitted to shooting Ball in the face. She said that he kept talking about the murder and it seemed like his conscience was bothering him, so she shot him to keep him quiet. She assumed he would have died on the side of the road. Sometime after Amanda was arrested, she gave an interview to a reporter. She said that killing Charlie Taylor was like the first time she rode a roller coaster. In November 2015, Amanda Taylor was sentenced to life in prison. Sean Ball pleaded guilty to all charges, and he was sentenced to 41 years in prison. Number 2. Andrei Emyanikov. In the fall of 2018, 44-year-old Sergei Danilov was a health and safety lecturer at a polytechnic in Moscow, Russia. Danilov was married and he had 3 children. Danilov was considered a strict but fair teacher. One of his students was 18-year-old Andrei Emeliannikov. Emeliannikov was addicted to video games. Supposedly, he idolized the character Walter Hill, who was the main antagonist in the game Silent Hill 4: The Room. Walter Hill is a serial killer who dies by suicide and then becomes an undead being. As an undead being, Walter continues his murder spree. Emeliannikov did not like Danilov. Emeliannikov wrote on an internet forum that he wanted to kill Danilov, but no one who read the posting took him seriously. They just assumed he was blowing off steam. During the last 2 weeks of October, Emeliannikov did not attend classes. Danilov informed Emeliannikov that he was going to get him expelled. November 1st, 2017 started off as a typical day for 44-year-old Sergei Danilov. He went to school and he taught several classes. During a break between classes, 18-year-old Andrei Emeliannikov walked into his classroom carrying a bag. In the bag was a knife, a hatchet, and a circular saw. Emeliannikov grabbed the knife and walked up behind Danilov. Emeliannikov stabbed him in the throat. Danilov fell face first to the floor. Emeliannikov then took out his phone and took a selfie of himself smirking, with his teacher either dead or dying in the background. He then took a photograph of his blood-soaked hand holding the bloody knife. The next photograph he took was him with a circular saw resting on his shoulder. Emeliannikov then posted the photographs on Russia's most popular social media service, VK. He posted the pictures along with a song by a metal band named November's Doom. Not long after he made the posting, another teacher walked into the classroom. Emeliannikov then turned on the circular saw and he pressed the blade to his own neck. He bled to death on the same floor as his teacher. VK took down the photos about an hour after they were posted, but they were still saved and shared by several people. Also, somehow, photos of Emeliannikov's dead body made it onto the internet and they can be found on gore websites. It is thought that Emeliannikov had been planning the attack for months. Starting months earlier, anytime he wrote a post on the internet, he would add the hashtag 11117. Emeliannikov committed the murder on the first day of the 11th month in 2017. It's also believed that picking the band November's Doom was symbolic in some way. There was also some speculation that the murder-suicide was part of an internet game called the Blue Whale Challenge. In the supposed challenge, a stranger gives a person 50 tasks to complete over 50 days. At first, the tasks are tame and easy to do. For example, they have to watch a horror movie in the middle of the night. But then the tasks become more violent and involve self-harm. The final task is that the participant has to kill themselves. However, the police were never able to confirm that Emeliannikov was involved in the Blue Whale Challenge. In fact, there are no confirmed deaths connected to the challenge. Many people believe that the Blue Whale Challenge is just an internet urban legend. Number 1. Bashid McLean. On February 26, 2013, a dog in the Bronx, New York found a human leg in a pile of trash. The police were called and they looked around the neighborhood. They found 3 suitcases, which all contained the body parts of a woman. The police were able to identify her as 52-year-old Tanya Bird, who worked as a home health aide. The police went to her apartment and they found traces of blood that someone had tried to clean up. The police's first suspect was Bird's eldest son, who lived with her, 23-year-old Rashid McLean. Rashid had a history of mental illness. He had been in and out of psychiatric hospitals for most of his life. According to some reports, Rashid had schizophrenia. The police brought Rashid in for questioning and they looked through the photos on his smartphone. They were horrified by what they found on his phone. There was a selfie of Rashid smiling and holding up his mother's severed head. There was another photograph of his mother's torso with a 2-foot Black & Decker jigsaw resting on it. The medical examiner determined that Bird had died from a stab wound to the neck and then she was dissected afterward. The police confronted Rashid with what they found. He admitted to cutting up his mother. He said if you can kill somebody, you should be able to cut them up too. If you can't do that, if you don't have the stomach to cut them up, then you're a coward. However, Rashid said he didn't kill his mother. Instead, Rashid said his friend, William Harris, killed his mother. Rashid said that after Harris killed his mother, Harris demanded that he help him dismember and dispose of his mother's body. Rashid said if he didn't do what Harris told him to do, Harris was going to kill his younger brother, who was asleep in the next room. So they both went to the hardware store and bought the saw. Then they came back and dismembered the body. William Harris was arrested as well, and he denied killing Tanya Bird. He said that Rashid had told him to come over. When he got there, Bird was already dead. Then Rashid started yelling at him to help dismember the body. Harris said that when Rashid yelled at him, it made him feel like spaghetti on the inside. He thought if he didn't help Rashid, then Rashid would kill him. So he helped cut up the body, and then he also helped dump the body parts. Rashid was charged with second-degree murder. At one of his first court appearances, he wore a trash bag. Before his court appearance, he kept urinating in his pants, so the court personnel gave him a garbage bag to wear. Rashid McLean went to trial in the fall of 2016, about 3 years after the murder. Rashid's family said that shortly before his mother was killed, his mother wanted to kick him out of the apartment because she suspected he was abusing his younger brother. The prosecutor said that Rashid and Bird most likely got into an argument over the living arrangements and Rashid stabbed her. Rashid was found guilty and he was sentenced to 25 years to life. William Harris was charged with unlawful dissection of a human body and hindering the prosecution. He was sentenced to 5 months in prison. Sadly, there is one more tragic element to the story. Before Rashid had killed his mother, he had been married to a woman named Velma McLean. The two had met in a group home. Rashid's family was vehemently against the relationship. Rashid's family thought that he was abusive and unstable, and they were worried about what he might do to Velma. Nevertheless, Velma and Rashid got married. Their marriage bore a son, Samir. Rashid and Velma either broke up while Velma was pregnant or shortly after Zamir's birth, and Rashid moved back in with his mother. Zamer was 3 months old when Bashid killed his mother. After the murder, Velma changed her name to Zara Coombs. She also filed for divorce, and it was settled in November 2016. In January 2017, Zara was living with her boyfriend. On the night of January 25, 2017, her boyfriend called 911. He explained that he had been out and Zara had been home with Zamer. When he got home, he found 4-year-old Zamer unresponsive. Zamer was rushed to the hospital, but there was nothing that could be done for him, and he was pronounced dead. At first, Zara told the police that Zamer had fallen out of the bathtub, but she later explained that Zamer wanted food and she refused to make him something to eat. Zamer grabbed an egg from the fridge and he dropped it on the floor. Zara said she became enraged, so she beat the 4-year-old to death with a broom handle. In May 2018, Zara Combs pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and she was sentenced to 17 years in prison. Bashid's family found the situation sadly ironic. Bashid was a son who killed his mother, and his ex-wife, Zara, was a mother who killed her and Bashid's son. Thank you very much for listening, and thanks a lot for your support. But that is all for today. Thank you again for everything.